Our text for today is John's account of the Lord's Supper, the Gospel of John, chapter 13. We'll begin reading with verse 21 and read through verse 30. When Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, "Most assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. Then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it." And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, "What you do, do quickly." But no one at the table knew for what reason he said this to him. For some thought, because Judas had the money box, that Jesus had said to him, "Buy those things we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. Having received the piece of bread, he then went out immediately, and it was night. Yes, it was definitely night when Judas did what he did. Back in 1967, a television program made its debut, and it was so popular it's still being shown 50 years later. The name of the show was "You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown." Remember that? Well, there is a segment in that show entitled "It's Suppertime." Snoopy is laying out on top of his doghouse, as he often did. But he's not happy. He's holding his stomach. And it's obvious from the picture his stomach is not happy either. And this is what Snoopy sang. Now, I'm not going to sing it. He sang it in the program, but these are the words to what he sang. "My stomach clock just went off. It's supper time, and Charlie Brown has forgotten to feed me. Here I lie, a withering hollow of a dog, and there sits my supper dish empty. But that's all right. He'll remember when no furry little friend comes to greet him after school. Then he'll remember, and he'll rush out here to my doghouse, but it will be too late. There will be nothing left but my dried carcass. There will be nothing left but my bleached bones." And at that moment in the show, Charlie Brown showed up with Snoopy's supper dish full of food. And then Snoopy did that little dance that he's so famous for. The moral of that story is this: supper time was very important to Snoopy the dog. Supper time was even important to Charlie Brown. And supper time is very important for us, for we usually don't miss it. But I say all that to say this: this supper time is the most important supper time of all. This supper time. And today we're going to take a bit of an unusual look at the Lord's Supper. I'm going to give you 4 facts about sin and evil that are shown to us, given to us, out of all places when it was supper time in the life of our Lord. Fact number 1, when it comes to sin, there are no off-limits. No off-limits. By that I mean, no matter the time, no matter the place, no matter the people, sin can and will happen. Look at the Lord's Supper. The time is the very first Lord's Supper. Look at the place, the famous upper room where it took place. And then look at the people who were there. You've got Jesus Christ and you've got his 12 disciples the greatest team ever assembled. Now, folks, you couldn't find a time, a place, or a group of people any more or as spiritual as that time, that place, and those people. And yet, even at that time, even in that place, and even with those people, sin showed up and reared its ugly head in what Judas was about to do. Now, folks, if sin and evil could show up there, it can show up anywhere, anytime, any place, in any group of people. So my point from this first point is clear. Always be on guard. Always be aware, awake, and alert. For sin can sneak up on us and strike us at any time, any place, with anyone. Out of the blue, from nowhere, sin will do this. And so our first point that we learn from the Lord's Supper is, when it comes to sin, there are no off limits. Second fact that the Lord's Supper teaches us about sin. When it comes to sin, there's no off guard. No off guard. Now by this I mean, sin never catches the Lord off guard. Verse 21, what did Jesus tell the disciples? One of you will betray me. So you see, while the sin that Judas would do surprised, shocked, stunned, and caught the disciples off guard, it did not surprise, stun, shock, or catch Jesus off guard at all. He knew what the sin would be, and he knew who would commit the sin. Now, this isn't true of us. We're like the other 11 disciples. Sin and evil sneaks up on us, surprises us, shocks us, and stuns us. Sin and evil sneaks up on us and blindsides us, throws us a curve and throws us for a loop. Sin and evil is on us before we know it, but not so with our Lord. And here's the good news from this. While we are never ready or prepared for sin, He always is. He's always ready and prepared for it. And that means He can handle it. He can deal with it. You see, sin and evil surprises us and we hit the panic button. But the Lord doesn't have a panic button. For sin and evil never surprises Him. So remember this. The next time sin and evil sneaks up on you and stabs you in the back and cuts your legs out from under you, and it probably won't be long, remember this. He's ready for it. He's prepared for it. He's got it covered. He's got a plan to deal with it. Because when it comes to sin, there is no off guard when it comes to the Lord. And then the third truth we see from the Lord's Supper, when it comes to sin, there's no off the record. No off the record. That is, He sees, He knows, He notices all of the sin and evil that's committed. Verse 27, after Jesus handed the bread to Judas, He told Judas to go out and do his evil quickly. And then, as verse 29 tells us, the disciples believed that Jesus was sending Judas over to Kroger's to buy some groceries. But as we know, that wasn't it at all. Okay, why did Jesus send Judas out? Why did He send him out? Knowing what he was going to do. By sending him out of His presence, He is pronouncing judgment on what Judas was about to do. By sending him out of that room, He's clearing the room of the presence of that evil. He's judging that sin that Judas was going to do. And this is always the case with sin and evil. It's always known and noticed by the Lord. It's always judged by the Lord. Now, when it comes to people, people can fool our courts, our legal system, our judicial system. Happens all the time. People can pull the wool down over the eyes of Lady Justice. Happens all the time. People literally can get away with murder. Happens all the time. But no one gets away with any sin and evil when it comes to the Lord. You see, the Lord can't be conned or scammed. He can't be fooled or fleeced. He can't be bought or bullied. He can't be pressured or swayed. And He has no statute of limitations when it comes to our sin and evil. His judgment of sin and evil, it may happen fast or it may happen very, very slowly, but mark it down. No evil goes unnoticed and unknown and unpunished by our Lord. No one beats the route when it comes to the Lord's judgment. For when it comes to sin, none of it is off the record. But the fourth fact we learn from the Lord's Supper, and this is the good one. This is the good one. When it comes to sin, there is an offset to it. There is an offset for our sin. Now, some people would read this story and they would say, well, evil won here, because the very next day Jesus was crucified on the cross. But no, we know better. Evil did not win here at all. For what did the crucifixion of Jesus Christ accomplish? A way for mankind to be saved from his sin. Do you see what happened here? God took this low-down, polecat evil, this sin of betrayal and treason, and He used it to help bring about your salvation and my salvation. That's the magnificent, mighty, matchless power of our God. He has the power to take the absolute worst, offset it, and bring out of it the absolute best. And folks, He still has this same power, and He still uses it this way in our lives every single day. Now let's be clear. God doesn't cause sin and evil. I know He gets blamed for it. I hear it almost every day. People blaming God for something bad or wrong that's happened. God doesn't cause evil. Okay? It's not caused by Him. It saddens Him. It saddens Him. It breaks His heart. For as we noted in our text, He was troubled in spirit. Why was He troubled in spirit? Because of his sin and evil. So God doesn't cause it. But when it happens to us, He uses even sin and evil to accomplish and bring about good for us. Now at the time, we can't see it, and we don't know it. But in time, over time, and later on in time, with our 20/20 hindsight, we can look back and we see how God took that evil and He brought good out of it. What a mighty God we serve, folks. What a mighty God we serve. So mighty that in the end, evil does not win. There is an offset to our sin. Now here's my question to you today. Has your sin been offset? Or is it still being set off? Is your sin off the record in the sight of God? Or is it still on the record? There's one way to get your sin offset. There's one way to get your sin off the record in the sight of God, and that's the cross. That's Jesus Christ bleeding and dying, giving His body and blood on the cross to pay our sin debt off and to save us from our sin. And that's why after our invitation today, we're going to have supper time. That's why we're going to have a full supper dish. Jesus Christ filled our supper dish with His body and His blood. And because of that, we can be and we are saved. So, I ask you again, has your sin been offset? There's only one way for it to be offset and taken off the record. And that's by coming to Jesus Christ and trusting what he did for you on the cross. So at this time, as Brother Tim comes to lead us, we're going to issue our invitation. And if you've never been to the cross, I urge you to come to the cross, for it is there and only there that our sin can be offset and taken off the record.